The music was so loud that the windows of my son's house were shaking. People were laughing by the pool. Glasses were clinking. Someone had turned the speakers up so high that the bass echoed through the warm Florida evening. But upstairs, in a dark bedroom, only a few steps away from that celebration, my son was slowly dying. And nobody at that party seemed to care. I didn't know it yet when I stepped out of the car that night, but the next few minutes were going to reveal a truth that would break my heart, shake my faith in family, and remind me that sometimes the people closest to you can ignore the very person who needs them the most. What I found inside that house is something no father should ever have to see. And if I had arrived even one day later, my son might not be alive today. Welcome to my YouTube channel Whisper Stories, where silence speaks. My name is Addison, and I am 67 years old. At 67, you believe you have already faced the worst that life can give you. You believe you've buried enough pain, swallowed enough pride, and sacrificed enough dreams to earn at least a little peace in your later years. After all, a father spends his whole life building something for his children, working longer hours than his body can handle, putting aside his own desires, and convincing himself that every sacrifice will someday mean something. But sometimes life waits until you are older, until your heart is softer and your hopes are quieter, before it delivers a pain you never imagined possible. And the day I flew to Florida without warning was the day I discovered just how cruel that pain could be. 3 days before that flight, I received a phone call that didn't feel right from the moment I answered it. It was my daughter-in-law, Melissa. Her voice sounded oddly cheerful. "Hi Addison, just wanted to let you know that Daniel is a little under the weather. Nothing serious though, just the flu." I frowned immediately. My son Daniel was not the kind of man who got a little under the weather. He was strong, healthy, the kind of person who went jogging before sunrise and fixed broken things around the house without even being asked. "What kind of flu?" I asked. "Oh, just something going around," she replied quickly. "He's resting." Something in her voice felt rushed, rehearsed. A father learns to hear things that others miss. "Can I talk to him?" I asked. "He's asleep right now," she said. "Doctor said he needs rest." The conversation ended shortly after that, but my mind wouldn't settle. That night I barely slept. Something was wrong. The next morning I called Daniel again. No answer. I called Melissa. No answer. By afternoon, my chest felt heavy, with a strange kind of dread that I couldn't explain. I had spent 67 years on this earth, and I had learned that sometimes your instincts know the truth before your mind is ready to accept it. By evening, I had booked a flight. I didn't tell anyone. Not Melissa. Not even Daniel. If everything was fine, I would simply surprise them with a visit. But if something wasn't fine, I needed to see it with my own eyes. The flight to Florida felt longer than any journey I had ever taken. Every passing minute filled my head with darker possibilities. Hospitals, accidents, illness. I tried to calm myself by staring out the airplane window at the endless clouds, but the quiet voice inside my chest kept whispering the same thought. Something is wrong with your son. When the plane finally landed, I rented a car and drove straight to Daniel's house. It was nearly sunset. As I turned onto their street, I noticed something strange immediately. Cars. A lot of cars. Loud music floated through the warm Florida air. My confusion grew as I pulled into the driveway. People were laughing. Music was blasting. Bright lights filled the backyard. It looked like a party. For a moment, I wondered if I had the wrong house. But no, that was Daniel's car parked by the garage. I stepped out slowly. Music thumped through the walls while people's voices spilled out of the backyard. I walked around the side of the house and froze. Melissa stood near the pool wearing a bright red dress, holding a glass of wine while laughing with a group of guests. A party, while my son supposedly had the flu. My stomach tightened. I stepped closer. Someone noticed me first. "Hey, who's that?" Melissa turned around. The smile on her face vanished instantly. Addison. Her voice was sharp, surprised. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I repeated quietly. My eyes moved around the backyard. Music. Alcohol. Dozens of people. You told me my son was sick. Her face stiffened. He is resting. Resting, I asked slowly, with a party in the backyard. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Melissa crossed her arms. He told me to still have it. It was planned weeks ago. That didn't sound like Daniel. Not even close. Where is he? I asked. She hesitated. He's upstairs. Without another word, I walked toward the house. Behind me, the music continued. The laughter continued. As if nothing was wrong. As if my son wasn't lying somewhere inside that house. The moment I stepped upstairs, the sound of the party faded. The hallway was dark and quiet. Daniel's bedroom door was half open. I pushed it gently, and what I saw inside made my heart stop. My son was lying in bed. Pale, sweating, barely conscious. Medical bottles sat on the nightstand. His breathing was shallow and uneven. Daniel, I whispered. His eyes slowly opened. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face. Then recognition. Dad. His voice was barely more than a breath. I rushed to his side. What happened to you? He tried to sit up but winced in pain. Kidney infection spread to my blood. My chest tightened. Sepsis? I asked quietly. He nodded weakly. My hands trembled. Sepsis was serious. Dangerously serious. Have you been to the hospital? I asked. They sent me home, antibiotics, but it's getting worse. I looked around the room again. No nurse. No care. No one watching him. Downstairs, music boomed again. Laughter erupted from the backyard. I felt something inside me crack. Does Melissa know how bad this is? I asked. Daniel looked away. She thinks I'm exaggerating. The words felt like knives. My son was fighting a life-threatening infection. And his wife was hosting a pool party. I stood up slowly. Anger burned through my chest like fire. But first, I called an ambulance. Daniel needed a hospital immediately. While we waited, I returned downstairs. The party was still going strong. Melissa stood by the pool again, laughing with friends. When she saw me, her smile faded. Is he okay? She asked casually. An ambulance is on the way, I said. The entire backyard went quiet. An ambulance, she repeated. Yes. I stepped closer. My son is septic. Her face went pale. What? He could die. Several guests gasped. Melissa looked stunned. I didn't know it was that serious. You didn't bother to check, I said. Silence spread through the crowd. Music still played quietly in the background, but nobody was dancing anymore. Your husband is upstairs fighting an infection in his bloodstream, I continued. And you're down here throwing a party. No one said a word. Within minutes, the flashing lights of the ambulance filled the street. Paramedics rushed upstairs and carefully placed Daniel on a stretcher. As they carried him past the party guests, many people looked ashamed. Melissa stood frozen near the door. Can I come? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer. But I did. You should have been there already. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what I feared. Daniel's infection had worsened significantly. If he had waited another day, he might not have survived. Those hours in the emergency room were some of the longest of my life. I sat beside his bed while doctors worked around him. Machines beeped softly. Fluids ran through IV tubes. And I kept thinking about how close I had come to losing my son. Eventually, Daniel opened his eyes again. "Dad," he whispered. "I'm here," I said gently. Tears filled his eyes. I thought no one noticed. Those words shattered something inside me. No father ever stops noticing his child, I told him. Daniel stayed in the hospital for 8 days. Slowly, he began to recover. The infection retreated. His strength returned. Melissa visited a few times, but something between them had changed. The trust was broken. The illusion was gone. A marriage can survive many things. But neglect during a life-threatening moment is difficult to forget. One evening before Daniel was discharged, he looked at me and said something I will never forget. "You saved my life by showing up." I shook my head gently. "No, son." I squeezed his hand. A father's love simply refuses to stay away when something is wrong. Today, months later, Daniel is healthy again. He moved closer to me. He wanted to rebuild the bond we almost lost. Sometimes we sit on the porch together and talk about life, mistakes, and second chances. And I often think back to that night in Florida. The music, the laughter, the moment I opened that bedroom door. The moment I realized how close I was to losing my son. Life has a way of reminding us what truly matters. Not parties, not appearances, not pride, but love. Real love shows up when it matters most. Moral of the story: true love is not measured by words or celebrations. It is measured by presence during the darkest moments. The people who truly care about you will not be the ones laughing at the party. They will be the ones standing beside your bed when you need them the most.